Hi, I'm Yolanda, and this is Speak On. Today, we're talking about self care. We really need to prioritize putting ourselves first and really looking after our needs. We all talk about doing it, but do we really make time for it? Today, we're focusing on one type of self care that releases dopamine, endorphins, prolactin, and cortisol, a great combo of hormones that induce happiness, reduce stress, and help you sleep better. To discuss this further, I'm joined by unapologetically proud wanker and owner of sex boutique Self and More, Poppy Scarlett, because today we're talking about sex toys, self pleasure, and how it can make your life better. Welcome, Poppy.
Hello. That was an excellent intro.
Thank you. Thank you. How are you doing? And how is life as an unapologetic proud wanker?
It's great. Yeah. I mean, I've got my wanker t-shirt on today, actually,
Love
repping the
it.
brand, even though no one's going to be able to see me. But it is mad, isn't it? Like a whole year. I can't believe we've been locked down for basically a whole year.
It's wild, isn't it? And I can imagine that in this year, people have really kind of started to embrace wanking because, frankly, what are you going to do with the rest of the day?
Exactly. I mean, we've noticed such a big shift in the conversation around it. I think because people have been at home and forced to look to themselves for pleasure instead of like getting casual kicks or whatever, unless you live with a partner. So, yeah, everyone's wanking and I'm okay with that.
That's awesome. So, why are you so obsessed with wanking? Like, please tell me more about this.
I mean, so many reasons. I guess on a personal level, my experience with sex was it was always for fun and for the experience, but it wasn't necessarily for my pleasure. And it wasn't
Mhm.
until I started masturbating regularly and I started using toys that I realized how much pleasure I was actually capable of. And that was a real turning point for me personally with the sex that I was having. I felt more empowered to actually ask for what I want instead of kind of floundering upon the question, what do you want me to do? I didn't know because I
Mhm.
didn't know my own body until I started wanking. So, yeah, on a personal level, a huge advocate for it. And I think we see the same reflected culturally as well, like people who are more comfortable with the intimate parts of their bodies, people who understand kind of how anatomy works and which bits to touch and do what with, have better sex. It
Mhm.
empowers people to have better sex. So, yeah,
Yeah.
obsessed.
And I think that you've touched on something really specific there because there is a point, particularly as girls, as women, where we're not like I suppose we're not socialized to wank. I'm going to
Hmm.
say, and there is a point where you're like, oh yeah, no, this is great, and then there is a point where you're like, yeah, sex is all right. Then there's a point when you discover something new and you're like, oh shit, it can be that good. And then I think wanking gets you there sooner, so you can
Yeah.
understand that quicker because otherwise it's just wasted time not doing that.
I think you're spot on there. I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that, in sex education, we're not even taught that the clit exists. So unless you've touched your vulva and you found your clit, you're not going to know it's there or what to do with it, basically. And it takes some people a really long time, unfortunately, to find that out, especially if the people that they do end up having sex with also don't really know where they clit. So yeah, put your hands
Yeah.
down your pants and find out if you don't know already.
So like, is it possible to masturbate too much? This is like genuinely. I asked a few people, and I was like, I'm gonna speaking to Poppy. What questions have you got? And a few people asked that, which makes me think a lot about what their lockdown experience has been like.
I love that. Introduce me to those friends. Um, I think it's the same with anything that's fun or pleasurable. As long as it's kind of safe and it's not interfering with your personal life, it's not affecting your work and it's not affecting your relationships in a negative way. There is no thing as too much. It's only once it starts to get into that kind of compulsive behavior, like, sorry, I'm not going to go out today because I've got to complete my 10th wank,
Yeah.
that maybe that kind of attitude, or like, I can't work, sorry, I just can't
Yeah.
work because my hands are otherwise engaged.
So I'm not going to get that report to you on time. I have other things to do.
But apart from that, I don't think
Yeah.
there is such a thing as too much. It's not going to have a negative impact on your body if you are engaging in masturbation every day, for example.
Mhm. And I wonder though if there is a point where it's like, okay, I can do it better than anyone else, so now I don't want anyone else involved. Is that a thing that can happen? That people are like, no, it's just all about me. I don't need anyone else.
They might think that, but then I think you soon find that the intimacy that you get from partnered sex can't be replaced by a toy or your hand. Even if it is more effective and you can get there in 30 seconds flat by yourself.
It's just more time. It's just more time efficient. There are no other benefits to doing it to just excluding someone else.
Yeah, I think the better you get at it yourself, the less tolerant you are of people who can't do it to you. So I think most people just end up being like, no, this is the exact spot. You do it
Yeah.
like this. And if they don't do it, you just do it yourself during sex. And that's fine too.
So, like, what are the benefits of masturbation? Obviously, I covered a few things earlier about dopamine, cortisol, those kind of things. But what are the benefits?
Yeah, those ones are really good benefits if you're looking from a medical point of view. If you're talking to someone who's a skeptic, it's always great to bring out the dopamine and the serotonin because you can't argue with those facts.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, getting to sleep as well, focusing your mind. If you have a busy day and you can't concentrate, lots of people report having a wank and an orgasm helps them to like zone back in on what they're actually supposed to be doing.
Mhm.
For people who have periods, it can reduce period pain. And also, there's studies that are starting to suggest, or, people are starting to say that having an orgasm during your period can actually shorten the length of your period because of the
Oh,
contractions of the
yeah.
orgasm kind of helping the blood and the lining to shed quicker and come out of your body quicker. So if you have particularly bad periods, it could be worth trying that out. Um, Aside from the health benefits, there's the benefits we've been speaking about understanding your body and knowing what turns you on. I think in this life, there are very few selfish acts that we can do that don't impact anyone else and just give us pure pleasure. And I think masturbation is one of those, and it should be indulged in as something that's can be free. You don't have to have any toys. You can just use your hands. It's a free thing that you can do that will make you feel better. So,
I
yeah.
mean, these are all brilliant reasons to do it. Um, and we talked a little bit about it before with kind of like, well, with the women and girls aspect. Do we need to talk about it more to other women? Do we need to just start normalizing this conversation with all our mates and just talking about wanking endlessly?
I think we full on do need to do that. Yeah. And I'm always surprised actually at how many people reach out on the Self and More Instagram and message and tell us that they don't have anyone else to talk about this with, or it's not normalized in their friendship group to chat about wanking, even, just a top line like, I had a wank. We'll all happily tell people and our friends when we have sex that's really good. So why don't we say, I had an amazing wank? Why don't we do that? It's kind of weird. Um, so yeah, I think it's really important to talk about, even if you're not talking about, the specifics, but just talking to your friends about it as well. You can kind of, it's just a way to feel that it's normalized, and to lots of people still have some shame around masturbating and touching themselves and just pleasure and sex in general. So the only way that we can kind of shed some of that shame is to talk about it. So yeah, I'm a big advocate for talking about it wherever you can.
Why do people feel shame about it?
I think there's a lot of lingering shame from kind of religious aspects. There's lots of in lots of religions it tells people not to touch themselves. I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of stigma around female pleasure in particular because, in the past it's been frowned upon to have sex outside of marriage, for example. So masturbation is a form of sex, and so that is kind of by proxy seen as something you shouldn't do.
Mhm.
These are all kind of older ideas that I think in our society we are starting to lose at the moment, but there is still this kind of shame about just unapologetically feeling pleasure for yourself. um it's not something that's spoken about, like we mentioned, in either in sex education. Lots of people's parents never talk to them about masturbation. um we have the kind of the jokes around boys masturbating as teenagers, things like, oh, the crusty sock and
Yeah.
wet dreams, and making jokes about all those kind of things. And we don't see the same replicated for women. So straight away, there's this kind of imbalance of, this is a thing that boys do. Is it a thing that women do? Who knows? And it's not until you actually do it and figure out, like, oh yeah, this is something we all do.
Yeah. And have you ever felt like any shame or been embarrassed about your attitude to wanking or sex?
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't really bother me, and it's something that I can kind of shake off quite easily. And the last few years, most of that shame is pretty much gone. But definitely when I was younger, whenever I would kind of touch myself, for example, before I really knew what it was, I would feel like, oh, what is this? Is this okay? Do other people do this? Because you just don't know.
Mm.
Um, and particularly, I'm a bit of a self-proclaimed slut, so I've definitely definitely felt some slut shaming in my life. But
Mhm.
again, I just think that other people's opinions only bother you if you choose to let them. So it's just my attitude that you should do what you want as long as it isn't hurting anybody else.
Absolutely. Yeah. What other people think about you is none of your business. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
So it's obvious that we need to stop like demonizing women when it comes to masturbating, but how do we make the changes? Like, what's the first step that we can take?
I think the first step is that we need to start educating people at a young age. Because while it's all well and good now to kind of unlearn these things, it's better to just not learn them in the first place. So sex education needs to start much younger, and we need to include things like pleasure, because there is no pleasure in sex education at the moment. We need to
None.
teach none, which I
Mm.
find mad. It's kind of like they're saying the only reason you would ever have sex is to have a baby.
Literally, it's like just spit out a baby. That's all that's for.
That's it.
Yeah.
And if you're gay, just never have
It's
sex.
literally, there's none of that. It's just like, yeah, your vagina just does nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. It's just
It's pointless.
decoration. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that is a fundamental issue. We need to educate people about their bodies, about pleasure, about the fact that sex is for pleasure, and just the fact that masturbation exists and it's something you can engage in a healthy way.
Mm.
And I think parents as well have a responsibility to talk to their children at an appropriate age about masturbation, because it's very common for quite young children to masturbate, not in a way that, they're doing it for orgasm, but they just realize that it feels good, so they rub themselves against things, like the teddy bear or whatever. And when these behaviors are observed, that's a perfect opportunity for parents to not go, oh, stop doing that, no,
Yeah.
that's really bad, but to be like, okay, maybe you could do that in
Yeah.
private. That's something
Maybe
that we
don't
all
do
do
that in
in private.
Tesco. Yeah.
Yes. Don't do that when Uncle Bob and Sandra are around.
Exactly.
um, so there's ways that we can have these conversations that just take it from being a point of shame to just something that is perfectly natural and normal. um, and then, yeah, as adults, I think learning about these things and acknowledging where you might have gaps in your knowledge as an adult is really important. Reading books and understanding anatomy and sexual response, I think these kind of things are really important, and things that we can all do just to realize that everybody has a body and everyone masturbates, and the more we know about it, the less scary it is.
Mm. Absolutely. I remember just not really seeing it even talked about on TV until Sex and the City.
Oh my god, yeah.
Yeah.
And
And
yes,
it was
Samantha
Samantha,
and her
and
rabbit.
it's when yeah, Samantha and a rabbit, and when her and Miranda, and they just didn't not Miranda, yeah, and they just didn't leave the house for ages because of it. And that was the first time I'd ever really seen like it talked about on TV or even talked about like with my mates and stuff. It was just that was the first time.
Yeah, I think you're so right there. In the media, in TV and film in general, I think women's pleasure in particular is just ignored a lot of the
Mm.
time. And the representations we see of sex is that
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
something that happens in a heterosexual relationship to please the man, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And also everybody seems to be having a really good time while nothing else is really happening to them. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I just feel like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you wouldn't have a good time, but I'm like, would you have this much of a good time from just that?
Yeah, yeah. Would you
Yeah.
really be moaning in that uncomfortable position after 10 pumps? I don't think
Exactly.
so.
No, no. And you definitely get a cramp.
Oh my
Just
god,
like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And no one ever seems to get sweaty. No one's makeup is ever smudged. There's never
No,
any wet patches on the bed.
never. And no, yeah, no one is avoiding the wet patch. Be like, you sleep in it. There's none of that going on. So it's like, if you're a
Oh,
gentleman, you'd sleep in it. No, it's
yeah.
none of this. Yeah.
And especially when it comes to masturbation, I think you do see more depictions of men wanking,
Mhm.
I guess because it's more visceral. You can kind of you
Yeah.
can see the action of like the hand going up and down underneath pants or underneath a cover.
Mm.
So I think that's you see that in films quite a lot, but you don't see that many representations of women touching themselves in TV and films. And when you do, it's this very stylized, perfect, like, oh, I'm a woman and I'm touching my flower, like version of masturbation, which isn't real. Like, women also are hunched over in weird positions and have a double chin looking at their phone and are sweating profusely while they're masturbating too. Like, just because we're feminine people, it doesn't mean that we're feminine and delicate when we're masturbating.
Well. I mean, speak for yourself then. Honestly, when I do, there's lighting. I'm reclined in a really lovely way. There's music that just appears from nowhere.
Yeah,
It's just,
there's birds tweeting.
literally little cartoon ones.
Sounds great.
I know,
Have
and
you considered recording this?
I don't know. Maybe that this could work for an OnlyFans. Exactly.
Definitely. Strong concept right there. Your niche is the most beautiful wanker.
Exactly. Yes. Can you imagine if that was a thing? I feel like have we come on? Is this an idea that we've got now? Is this something that
This
we
is
need
an
to
idea.
start? Yeah. Exactly.
This has turned into a business idea.
Literally. Is this a pitch meeting?
Do we need to get investors?
Right. Yeah. So, like, tell me more about like starting Self and More. How did this come about? Like, how old were you when you came up with the idea? Like, how quickly is everything built? Tell me all about it.
Sure. So I started South and More in 2019, so nearly 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I was working full time in marketing, like pretty much everyone in London, I think. And I'd always really hated working in an office, and I'd always been really obsessed with sex. So naturally, over time, I was buying sex toys and always feeling really disillusioned, disenfranchised. I'm not sure what the dis word that's relevant right here is. But every time that I bought a sex toy, I would feel like, this seems like it's focused around somebody else's pleasure. Lots of the big stores are very focused on the male gaze, and the way that they advertise their toys is women in lingerie, lace, reclining, busty blondes, and it's all very like hypersexualized, but from the male gaze. And I was kind of confused about, I was buying something for my pleasure, yeah, it's marketed to men basically.
Yeah.
I always found that really confusing. The other thing that I found really weird about all of these sites was that they categorized things by men, women, or gay men. And I always found this really jarring, because how do you know who I am or what my sexuality is? Like, to use a wand vibrator, you can have any body, you can use it on any body part. So what is to dictate who this is for? Like, how do you have that decision? So yeah, I did loads of research, and I just couldn't find a store in the UK that was doing this. There were stores in the US and in different countries that seemed to be doing this really well, but there was nothing in the UK. So I decided that I would start it myself. So yeah, cue me after work coming home and diligently researching vibrators for hours every evening. Putting a lot of hours of testing, all for the cause.
She really took one for the team.
Really took one for the team, like quadrupled my sex toy collection over a few weeks. Such hard work. No, did lots of work, used my marketing background. I'm quite fortunate that my boyfriend is a designer, so he helped me put together the website, bought a bunch of sex toys, put them in my living room, and started business.
Love it.
And yeah, for the first few months, it was kind of slow, I suppose, but I really focused on building a community online. Like, Instagram is one of our main marketing channels, and I wanted to use it to kind of put out content that is entertaining, but also educational, and little snippets of sex education that people can find online and feel empowered to go and explore their pleasure a little bit more. So put in a lot of hours on that and really focused on building that. And then slowly but surely, sales started to gradually increase. I would be on the way to my full-time job with a bag of sex toys on my shoulder to take to the post office before I started work. And then pandemic happened, and everyone started buying so many more toys.
Was
And
it like how quickly after the pandemic started did you start to see sales go
it
up?
was almost instant, to be honest.
That's brilliant.
Honestly, almost instant. So March hit and sales started climbing. We started working with more influencers and more people on our affiliate scheme who were also really sex positive. They started talking to their communities about us. And talking about toys and what gave them pleasure. It seemed like there was a shift in people online who didn't necessarily previously talk about sex, who were potentially, lifestyle and fashion influencers and content creators, started to talk about sex and orgasms and self-pleasure. And I guess that has like a ripple effect as well, doesn't it? And they were sending people back to us, and everything's grew nicely. And it got to the point around September time where I just couldn't physically do the two jobs anymore. Obviously I was working from home, so that freed up, and we couldn't go out, could we, for months, so that freed up a lot of time to work on the business.
Mm,
um, and then it got to September and I handed my notice in,
that's awesome.
which was so exciting, and became a full-time wanker. And I haven't looked back.
that's that's brilliant. And now we're kind of like starting to potentially ease out of lockdown. Have you seen like like habits change or people changing the kind of toys they're getting? And yeah, what's happened?
Yeah, I think we've seen like a peak in sales every time a new lockdown is announced. So it will be
Yes.
interesting. It will be interesting to see what happens now. Freedom is on the horizon. But
Yeah.
to be honest, I think the sex toy industry is always growing. So I
Mhm.
think there will always be demand.
Yeah.
Um, the toys that we've seen people buying have primarily been toys that you would associate, I guess, with self pleasure rather than toys that are explicitly partner focused,
Yeah.
which makes sense because that goes with our ethos around encouraging masturbation. Our best selling toy of the whole year is the Satisfier Pro.
Mhm.
Um, Suction toys have just been our best selling like category. So if you don't know, these are air pressure toys that you use on your clit. You can use them on other body parts too, but they have a small nozzle, so the clit is the perfect place for them. And the way that they work is through pushing air really quickly forward and backwards against your clit and creating kind of like a suction seal around it. So you get what all the brands call contact free orgasms. So you don't get the same kind of if you use a really powerful vibrator, you might feel a little bit numb for a few minutes afterwards, or you might feel a bit tingly, or you might feel a bit like, oh, don't touch me, I'm hypersensitive. With a suction toy, because it's frictionless effectively, you don't really have those same I was going to say symptoms, but that makes it sound like a sickness. You don't really have those same side effects,
Yeah.
so you can kind of go back for multiple orgasms if you so wish. So I think that's why it's been so popular.
Ah, yeah. I remember there was when did they come about? Because I just remember just seeing them all of a sudden because of an Amazon review that went viral, and then it turned into, and then it became a news story. I
Yeah,
hadn't seen them before then.
that is the best piece of PR I think I've ever seen a
Lit-
sex toy do.
Literally, honestly, I was like, "This is yeah." That was inspired because
That
then
was,
I
yeah.
remember they sold out like straight after, didn't they?
Yes. And you know what? We find the toys on our website that have the good reviews naturally sell better. And we get a lot of reviews for those suction toys around like, put a towel down before you use this
Yeah,
toy. And people like that.
yeah. It's good to have like nice, honest reviews as well. You want to be prepared, don't you?
Totally. Yeah. Otherwise, you'll have to change the sheets. No one wants that.
So, like, well, when you started your business, then what were the main obstacles you had to overcome when starting something really specifically around sex toys?
I think my main obstacle on a personal level was just having a full-time job, which was not necessarily a job that I knew that they would accept this second career being in sex.
Hmm.
So I had to keep that a secret from my colleagues. Well, maybe I didn't have to, but I chose to keep that a secret. So I
Hmm.
felt like I was kind of leading a double life of like going to work, sitting in the office, and then coming home and living my secret vibrator life in the evening. Um, so that felt like a bit of a challenge, like hiding that part of my personality and my life.
Hmm.
And then I guess just finding the right tone and figuring out how to relate to people and relay this information in a way that the social media in particular will allow you to, because obviously there are lots of guidelines, community guidelines,
Mhm.
that are quite easy to violate if you talk about anything that is explicit or
Mhm.
deemed to be sexual solicitation in the eyes of Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what this means is that we get censored quite a lot. Like lots of, I think it. We are affected less than sex educators and sex workers who are on the platform. They're targeted a lot more than us, but you do have to be careful about what you're saying, and I find that that is quite difficult when you're trying to preach sex positivity and remove
Mm.
the shame. When you find yourself having to censor words like vulva, penis, sex, it to me it feels like you're then sending the message that these words need to be censored, but we
Yeah.
have to do it to stay alive on the platform. So that
Mm.
is a really frustrating challenge.
I hope they change that, because I know that's affected so many people. And some of our previous guests have talked about basically just what a bloody pain it is to constantly have content censored or removed. But then if you have a blue tick, or if you're famous, you could be practically naked and say what you want, and then
Yes.
nothing happens.
Yeah, this is something that I find so frustrating. You see big accounts like the brand accounts for Playboy or OnlyFans will be
Mm.
posting like models in tiny little string bikinis, but then you get someone who is fatter or black, and Instagram instantly sees that as content that is deemed inappropriate, even though the same amount of flesh is on show.
Mhm.
And it's a problem. It is a real problem, and I hope to see that censorship removed, but you know, probably
We'll
isn't going to
see.
happen.
Exactly. Someone needs to come up with a new Instagram kind of model where you can just put what you like.
This
Yeah.
is the thing, isn't it?
Just
Because
one, just yeah, just sexy Instagram. Just sexy
sexy
Instagram.
Instagram.
Yeah.
I did see there's a company called Lips who are a zine, and they have created a kind of a feed, a social feed in that way, where you can post what you like, and it's geared towards specifically um, female identifying people. And like this idea is great, and I love the idea of these things, but at the same time, when we're trying to preach sex positivity, we want to do it to people who aren't necessarily already sex positive. You
Yeah.
know, we want to reach everyone, and not everyone is going to be on one of those smaller platforms.
Absolutely. And like we were saying as well, we want to reach women and let them know there's no shame in it. We should all know about it. The earlier you know about it, the less time you waste having mediocre sex. This is an important message.
Exactly.
And so when people like shop from Self and More, the 5% actually goes to like a different charity or charities organizations. Tell me more about that and what made you choose to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's really important as a business, as a commercial entity, to give some of your money back. We were doing smaller initiatives last year, like for example, selling t-shirts or a specific weekend, and we donate to lots of small initiatives here and there. But I felt like we had a responsibility to do something that was a bit more consistent. So now we're donating 5% of our profits to charity every quarter. The
Mm-hmm.
charity that we're supporting this quarter are called NAS, and they are a BAME-led sexual health agency. They're based in London, but they support people across the country, and their work is centered around providing services like counselling, and sexual health services and HIV services for people in BAME communities across the UK.
Well, that's awesome. That's so
Yeah,
cool.
I think that's cool.
Yeah, that is. So when you were like setting up Self and More, so you said, all of a sudden you're in a room surrounded, you're in a room surrounded to the
Can't
ceiling,
move.
literally just vibrators everywhere, just sex toys all over the place. How did you select your product? Obviously, there's this element of testing, but how did you think, okay, these are the ones I'm going to go with? Like, how does that process go?
It's always been really important to me that everything we stock is safe, body safe. So that
Mm-hmm.
is the first requirement. We won't consider something if it's a material that might be a bit dodgy. And that might sound, really simple, like surely all companies do that. But actually, the sex toy industry is largely unregulated. So
Mm-hmm.
lots of toys are made from kind of substandard materials. They're made from plastics, which might be soft and have harmful chemicals in, like chemicals that have been banned in kids' toys, but yet were still available in a dildo that you're going to put inside yourself. And this particular problem is really prevalent on toys. For example, on Amazon, if you're buying unbranded toys,
Mm.
you don't know what's going to be in it. So that was number one. That's the most important thing. The second thing is just quality and guaranteeing that this toy is going to be good. You know, we can't guarantee that every toy will suit every person, but
Yeah.
I vouch for all the toys that we stock. And, you know, lots of big stores might have kind of 5,000 different toys to choose from. We've got a
Yeah.
few hundred, but they're all great.
Yeah.
um, the other thing is toys that look good.
Mm.
So, not quite a lot of people I think are put off because the idea of a sex toy that a lot of people have is like a massive veiny cock
Yeah. And if it's for women, covered in glitter.
covered in glitter,
Yeah.
pink and glittery, which,
Yeah.
you know, done in the right way is quite nice.
Yeah.
But you want range, you know, you might want a toy that is quite muted, something that looks like an ornament, something sculpted out of glass, like something you're proud to own.
Hmm.
I really wanted the toys that we stock to be things that you don't necessarily feel like you have to shove in a drawer because they're embarrassing. Like, you're proud of these objects. So we
Yeah.
stock a lot of beautiful toys. Um, and the way that we find them is rigorous researching it online, reading lots of reviews, seeing what's already out there, working with suppliers, and then getting our hands on products and trying them. And just, you know, obviously I don't have every type of anatomy. I don't have a penis. I don't have a
Hmm.
prostate. So roping in my boyfriend, he's become a inadvertent sex toy tester, and just figuring out which toys are actually good and which ones might look good but are actually a bit shit.
Yeah. Fair
Yeah.
enough. And what's the most common question you're asked then about products when people are kind of just starting to engage with self and more?
I think people just generally don't know where to start sometimes because there is so much out there. So people will just get in touch and say something like, I want a toy, but I don't know what I want. So in that case, what we always do is we ask them which body parts you want to stimulate. You know,
Hmm.
when you touch yourself or when someone else touches you, do you like to be touched on the clit, inside the vagina, in the bum, penis, whatever? Find out what it is and then figure out what kind of level of intensity do they like. So, you know, if someone is really sensitive and normally touches themselves really gently, it would be foolish to recommend a plug-in mains operated wand vibrator because that's going to blow them into the next city.
Yeah.
um so yeah, matching people the type of stimulation they like with a relevant toy. um that's probably one of the most common questions we get, and then after that it's probably, what toy can I use with my partner? And
Yeah.
the answer to that is any toy that you want, because while some toys are marketed as couples toys, really you can use any toy with your partner. If it gives you pleasure alone or if it gives them pleasure alone, it can give you pleasure together.
Hmm. And so sex toys, like you've touched on the fact that they're not just for women. There are, so because I think so much of sex toys is just geared, and the kind of marketing and everything for it is just geared towards women, which obviously is great because, you know, let's have some fun. But I don't really know huge amounts about sex toys for men. Like, are there lots available, or is it quite a limited amount?
Yeah, this is such an interesting question because there are sex toys for absolutely everyone, for every person, with every body, with every taste. Um, and I think it is really interesting that we have seen this online sex positive movement for women, which celebrates now masturbation and sees it as a form of self care almost in a lot of places. But we haven't quite seen the conversation catch up for men. And I wonder why this is. I feel like there's probably a few things. We had an article on our website written by Beth Ashley, who's a great sex journalist, um, including people with in sex positivity. And
Mhm.
she mentioned, you know, is it because we have this idea of male sexuality being really straightforward and really simple, you know, touch the penis, whatever, stroke it a bit and it comes easy peasy. Whereas with women, there's this notion of like sexuality being quite complex and needing all these tools and gadgets and gizmos. It's not really like that, actually. You know, men have so much more potential for pleasure and we should be encouraging them to explore as well, things like, you know, exploring the prostate, which is such a big area for pleasure potential, that so many men just ignore or don't try for whatever the fear is. um Yeah, so I think there is kind of a lack of knowledge sharing, and we're finding that women are being empowered to talk about pleasure and masturbation, and now it's kind of flipped, and men are the ones who are kind of being left behind in this story, who don't necessarily feel empowered to talk about it in that way. You know, they might feel comfortable joking about it with their mates or whatever, but they probably aren't talking about it. I'm largely, you know, I'm, what's the word, generalizing.
Yeah.
Yeah. um but yeah, I think we need to empower people with penises and men to explore their sexuality and not see toys as something that is reserved purely for people who are lonely, or who can't get a shag or whatever. All of these stereotypes, they're not true. Toys are for everyone, and I think we should encourage everyone in equal measure to try them.
Awesome. So, do you have a top tip for for people on their self pleasure journey, whether they're at the beginning of it or whether they're fully into it? What tip do you have?
Oh, one top tip. How do I pick just one?
Well, if you have more than one, that's all right. You can throw a few out there.
Okay, I'll give you more than one. I think when it comes to choosing a toy, pick a toy that you fancy. Pick a toy that you want to have sex with. If you pick something that you don't like the look of, you will hide it away, and you might even feel shame about it. But if you've got a toy that you want to fuck, you will fuck it. Um, I think when it comes to masturbation and figuring out what gives you pleasure, this is tip number 2, by the way.
Mhm.
Um, it really pays to spend time figuring it out. Like, don't expect to just figure it out straight away and just have all the answers after one wank or one sexual experience. Um, I think we have a culture which encourages kind of like instant gratification, and just getting what you want right away and then moving on. But actually, there's a lot of pleasure to be had if you just slow everything down and really pay attention to your body and play around and have fun with it.
Awesome, brilliant. That's it. That's you just make sure you're prioritizing yourself, your self care. Think of the health benefits. Think of
Exactly.
the health benefits.
I think I saw a TikTok the other day that said people who masturbate twice a week live 3 months longer or something like that. I can't remember what it was. But there you go. If you want a longer life, masturbate.
People be out here just now living to 175 after listening to this.
I'm immortal.
So thank you so much for joining me today. This has been awesome. Where would you like to be found online? Where can we find out more about you, self, and more, etc.?
Sure. You can follow me on Instagram at Poppy Scarlett _. You can follow South and More on Instagram too for lots of sex positive content and entertaining reels. That's at South and More, and then the website is southandmore.co.uk.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Poppy. This has been awesome.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been so much fun.
Thank you for listening to Speak On. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share with your friends, family, co-workers, strangers in the street. To find out more about us, including our upcoming events, head over to Instagram, instagram.com/speakon_. Bye!